It was a morning in Tampa, Florida, that began like any other. The sun rose over the city, casting its soft golden light on the courthouse, which stood as a symbol of justice and order. Inside, the day was expected to unfold with routine matters, with cases that were likely to come and go without much attention. But little did anyone know, this day would be different. This day, Pam Bondi would find herself in the middle of a legal and moral battle that would leave an indelible mark on history. Pam Bondi, Florida's Attorney General, walked into the courthouse with her usual poise and confidence. She had a reputation for being a tough, no-nonsense attorney, known for her unwavering commitment to upholding the law and fighting for what she believed was right. She was always prepared, always sharp, and ready to take on whatever came her way. On this particular day, however, she had no idea that a simple legal proceeding would soon evolve into a confrontation that would pit her constitutional rights against the authority of a judge. She walked down the long hallway leading to the courtroom, her steps echoing off the marble floors. Her briefcase was in her hand, the metallic case gleaming under the overhead lights, a sign of the serious business she was about to undertake. As she reached the door to the courtroom, she took a deep breath and adjusted her blazer, a gesture that had become almost automatic for her over the years. She was prepared for anything, she thought, another day at work, just like any other. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. The judge, Alan Prescott, was already seated at the bench, his stern expression making it clear that this was not going to be a typical day in court. He was known for his strict adherence to courtroom decorum and his no-nonsense approach to justice. But today, the stage was set for something far more consequential than anyone could have anticipated. As Pam took her seat at the attorney's table, she felt a momentary sense of unease. Something about the atmosphere in the room felt different, and as she looked around, she could sense that everyone was waiting for something to happen. The court stenographers were poised at their stations, their fingers hovering over the keyboards, ready to capture every word. The bailiff stood by, his posture rigid, as though he too sensed that the usual proceedings would soon be disrupted. And then it happened. The silence in the room grew heavier as Judge Prescott leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Pam, with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. He spoke in a calm, almost calculated voice, his words cutting through the quiet like a knife. "Ms. Bondi," he began, his gaze unwavering, "there is no place for religious symbols in my courtroom. You will remove that cross from your neck, or I will have no choice but to impose a fine." Pam's heart raced. She had heard of judges imposing rules about courtroom decorum before, but this was something new, something personal. The cross she wore had always been a significant part of her identity, a symbol of her faith and values. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry to her, it was an expression of her deepest beliefs. And yet here she was, being asked to remove it under the threat of a fine. For a moment, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath. Pam didn't flinch. She didn't look down or hesitate. Instead, she raised her chin slightly and met the judge's gaze with calm defiance. She knew the stakes were high, and she knew that this was about much more than a simple piece of jewelry. It was about her rights, about her freedom to express her faith without fear of government interference. "Your Honor," she replied, her voice steady, "my cross is no different than a wedding ring or a family photo. It's a personal choice, and I do not believe it violates the rules of this court." Judge Prescott didn't seem convinced. He stared at her for a long moment, clearly not accustomed to being challenged in this manner. His expression darkened, and he repeated himself, his voice firm and unwavering. "No," he said. "You will remove it, or you will face a fine. There is no room for religious symbols in this courtroom." Pam, however, was undeterred. She didn't back down. Instead, she stood taller, her posture becoming even more resolute. "Your Honor," she said, her tone now even more forceful, "you may have the authority to enforce certain rules in this courtroom, but you do not have the authority to violate the Constitution." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, the judge seemed to falter. There was a pause, a moment of hesitation, as if Judge Prescott was grappling with the weight of her statement. The room was now silent, and Pam could feel the eyes of everyone in the courtroom on her. She wasn't just standing up for herself, she was standing up for something much bigger. "Your Honor," Pam continued, her voice unwavering, "when you ask me to remove this cross, you are asking me to forfeit my right to express my faith freely. You are asking me to abandon the very freedoms that this country was built upon. The First Amendment guarantees me the right to practice my religion without interference, and that includes the right to wear a symbol of that faith." The tension in the room was palpable. Judge Prescott, who had expected Pam to back down under pressure, found himself facing a legal challenge that he hadn't anticipated. Pam wasn't simply arguing for the right to wear a cross. She was challenging the very premise of what it meant to be free in America. Pam didn't stop there. She was prepared to fight this battle on every level, and she had the legal knowledge to back it up. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a document, placing it firmly on the table in front of her. She opened it slowly, making sure that everyone in the room could see the legal precedent she was about to cite. "Your Honor," Pam said confidently, "let's take a closer look at the law. In Tinker v. Des Moines, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that students do not shed their constitutional rights when they enter a public school. In West Virginia State Board of Education v. Barnett, the court held that individuals cannot be forced to abandon their religious beliefs, even in the face of government pressure. These cases are just two examples of the protections that the Constitution affords to individuals who wish to express their beliefs, even in public spaces." As Pam spoke, Judge Prescott's face grew increasingly pale. He had underestimated her, and now he found himself in a legal quandary. The cases Pam referenced were landmark decisions, and they made it clear that the government could not dictate how an individual practiced their religion or what symbols they could wear. Pam's argument was grounded in solid constitutional law, and it was clear that Judge Prescott was not prepared for this level of legal reasoning. The judge tried to regain control of the situation. "This is not a religious debate," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "This is about courtroom protocol and maintaining order." Pam's response was swift and firm. "Your Honor, this is not just about protocol. This is about the protection of fundamental rights, the very rights that are enshrined in the Constitution. I am standing here today not just as an attorney, but as a citizen exercising my constitutional freedoms." At that moment, the tide began to turn. Pam wasn't just defending her right to wear a cross. She was defending every American's right to freely express their beliefs without fear of government overreach. She wasn't just challenging a courtroom rule, she was standing up for the ideals of liberty, justice, and personal freedom. As the media began to pick up the story, legal experts across the country weighed in. Many praised Pam for her courage and her commitment to defending the Constitution. Her actions sent a powerful message that individual rights must always be protected, even in the face of authority. In the end, Judge Prescott had no choice but to back down. Pam Bondi had not only won the legal battle, but had also become a symbol of what it means to stand up for freedom. Her fight was not just her own. It was a fight for the rights of all Americans to express themselves freely and without fear. Pam's case wasn't just about a cross, it was about a deep belief in the principles that this country was founded upon: the right to freedom of speech, the right to practice one's religion, and the right to live without the government infringing on those rights. It was a reminder that sometimes standing up for what's right can make all the difference. In the end, Pam Bondi's courageous stand in that courtroom would be remembered as a defining moment in the ongoing fight for individual freedoms. She had stood firm against the forces of authority, and in doing so, she had shown the world that the Constitution was more than just a piece of paper. It was a living, breathing document that protected the rights of every citizen, no matter the cost.